China's decision to reject Vladimir Putin's recent proposal has created a major turning point in global diplomacy. For years, Beijing and Moscow have presented themselves as strategic partners against Western influence. But this rejection reveals the limits of that friendship. China's foreign policy is primarily based on pragmatism and economic benefit. When Russia approached China for a deeper trade or military support agreement, Beijing likely evaluated whether aligning too closely with a struggling Russia could damage its own financial and global reputation. China's economy, although strong, depends heavily on stability in global trade, especially with the United States and Europe. Supporting Russia too openly could invite secondary sanctions, threaten Chinese exports, and harm international investments. Therefore, this rejection is not just a diplomatic no, but a carefully calculated economic decision. Moreover, China's leadership may also be distancing itself from Russia's unpredictable war strategies. Beijing prefers a stable geopolitical environment for its Belt and Road projects, while Russia's conflict in Ukraine continues to destabilize regional markets. By refusing Putin's proposal, China sends a message that it prioritizes long-term stability over emotional or ideological alliances. In educational terms, this highlights an important principle of Realpolitik, a foreign policy approach where decisions are based on practical interests rather than moral or emotional grounds. China's move shows that even among supposed allies, national interest remains the supreme guide. Russia is now facing what analysts describe as the most severe economic decline since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Its dependence on energy exports, combined with Western sanctions, has created a situation where income from oil and gas no longer sustains national needs. Industries are cutting production due to supply shortages and lack of investment. The ruble continues to lose value, inflation is rising, and unemployment has reached levels that the government tries to hide from public statistics. The ongoing war has drained Russia's financial reserves. Billions are being spent on military equipment, logistics, and soldier salaries, while public infrastructure, healthcare, and education budgets shrink. This imbalance causes ordinary citizens to feel the burden through price hikes and reduced social services. International investors have almost completely withdrawn, and the isolation from Western technology has crippled Russia's innovation sector. Factories once dependent on imported machinery now struggle to repair or replace key components. In educational perspective, Russia's case provides a clear example of how economic over-reliance on a single export sector and political isolation can destroy long-term national stability. It also teaches students of economics and politics that war economies, although active in production, often fail to sustain public welfare or growth. Western sanctions remain one of the most powerful tools shaping Russia's current collapse. Since the start of the Ukraine war, the United States, the European Union, and allied nations have implemented over 13,000 separate restrictions, targeting banks, energy companies, defense firms, and individuals. These measures have frozen billions in assets abroad and blocked Russia from international financial systems such as SWIFT. The result is a suffocating economic environment where even basic international transactions become difficult. Without access to Western parts and technology, industries from aviation to automotive are slowing down. Meanwhile, attempts to substitute imports through China or Iran have been inconsistent and expensive. Additionally, energy sanctions have reduced Russia's ability to profit from oil and gas exports. Even though some countries still buy Russian energy, they now demand heavy discounts, cutting Moscow's income drastically. The sanctions are not only financial, they also create a psychological pressure on Russia's business community, leading many young professionals to migrate abroad. From an educational standpoint, this situation demonstrates the effectiveness of coordinated economic diplomacy. Rather than military confrontation, global powers can apply sustained financial pressure to influence a nation's behavior. It is also a valuable case study for students of international relations on how economic tools can serve as strategic instruments in global politics. Inside Russia, the effects of the economic collapse are becoming visible in daily life. Factories have begun furloughing workers or closing entirely due to raw material shortages and export bans. Inflation has sharply reduced the purchasing power of average citizens, while essential goods like medicines, electronics, and even basic groceries have become scarce. The industrial giants that once symbolized Russia's strength, such as its mining and energy sectors, are now cutting back production. Reports indicate that some workers are being paid late or partially, leading to frustration and strikes. For the government, keeping people employed has become a balancing act between propaganda and reality. Small businesses are suffering even more. With fewer imports, rising taxes, and restricted digital payment options, many entrepreneurs are shutting down. Educationally, this highlights how macro-level crises directly affect microeconomic structures. That is, how government policies and global sanctions trickle down to impact families, communities, and workers. The social consequences are also significant. Emigration among skilled workers is increasing, creating a brain drain. Meanwhile, propaganda and censorship make it hard for people to understand the real reasons behind their hardships. This serves as a case study in how economic isolation leads not only to financial decline but also to social discontent and intellectual loss. China's rejection has diplomatic consequences that extend far beyond trade. For years, Russia projected itself as a global power capable of forming strong alliances against Western dominance. However, when even a close partner like China distances itself, the image of unity begins to crumble. This shift affects Russia's credibility in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, regions where it tried to build influence. Nations observing this situation may question whether partnering with Moscow is beneficial or risky. From China's perspective, rejecting Putin's deal helps it maintain flexibility in global diplomacy. Beijing wants to keep good relations with Europe and the global South without being seen as a direct supporter of Russia's failing war economy. In an educational sense, this reflects a classic balance of power scenario in international relations. Nations often realign themselves to maintain equilibrium and avoid being dragged into another country's downfall. Russia's current credibility cost shows how diplomatic trust can erode quickly when a nation's economy and strategy falter. It also teaches an important lesson. Strong alliances depend on mutual benefits, not emotion or history. Once those benefits disappear, alliances weaken or break. The consequences of this geopolitical shift are far-reaching. As Russia's economic and diplomatic position weakens, its ability to sustain the war in Ukraine diminishes. Weapon production slows, funding becomes tighter, and morale among soldiers drops. This could lead to a gradual change in battlefield dynamics. For Ukraine and its Western allies, this presents an opportunity to strengthen negotiations or push for further military advantage. The weakening of Russia's economic foundation may force Moscow to seek a ceasefire or diplomatic resolution sooner than expected. Globally, China's move also influences how other nations view the ongoing war. Countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America may interpret China's rejection as a signal to keep a cautious distance from Russia, reshaping global alignments. Educationally, this scenario helps students understand interconnected global systems, how economic decisions by one major power can ripple across continents and affect wars, peace talks, and trade. It shows that in modern geopolitics, economic power and diplomatic perception are often more decisive than military force. Ultimately, China's rejection is not just a political statement. It is a lesson in global strategy, national interest, and the complex web of modern diplomacy.